It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and today we're taking a look at the movies of January 22nd, 1993. We got 4 movies to look at today, and this should be a quick one because I have not seen a single one of these movies, so I really cannot say too much about them. But, we gotta do something here, so let's go ahead and jump right on into it. Let's start off with the biggest new release of the weekend. Another movie that takes place in the snowy mountains. We already looked at it live last week, and now we have Aspen Extreme. So this is meant to be a parody, right? I mean, come on, man. Like, some of the stuff in here, in that trailer alone, looks completely ridiculous, but this is not a comedy, apparently. This is apparently being sold as a drama. It's supposed to be the Top Gun on the ski slopes, which I don't see how that is, because at least Top Gun was at least a decent movie. It wasn't this movie. This looks like a mix between Beverly Hills 90210 and Alive, kind of, because you got, like, this looks like a really bizarre movie, and a movie that I think is intended to be they wanted it to be serious, but it comes off comical. I mean, that scene where that one dude is just slamming the guy's face into the window and into the mirror, and the glass breaks on him, and he's like, look at him. He's like, look at yourself, look at yourself. I want him to say, I can't look at myself because you threw me into the goddamn glass, and now I've got glass in my face. It's like, what is even happening in this movie? It's like, none of this makes any sense whatsoever. And, I mean, the whole concept alone feels like a comedy, a parody of something, but no, this is being taken seriously, and it's just like, I really don't know what they were thinking when they made this movie, and none of the people in this movie have really. Well, I take that back, because I was about to say nobody here has really done anything of worth, but you've got Peter Berg in there as one of the main guys, Terry Polo from the Meet the Parents series, Finola Hughes, who was on All My Children, I believe. Yeah, General Hospital and All My Children. Pretty much the same thing, honestly. I don't watch soap operas, so I don't know for sure. But with that said, yeah, this movie doesn't look too promising. I mean, if this was intended to be sold as a drama, that trailer did not do them any favors. It looks like a parody of a comedic parody of what they were trying to accomplish here, and it just doesn't look very good at all. It looks like a movie that was just thrusted out there, just put out there to fill a slot in January. A movie that was probably intended for sometime in the winter, but studio saw how bad, just dumped it in January, and the end result is this. So, yeah, that's pretty much all I got to say about this one. Aspen Extreme. It does not look like a very good movie. Nor does our next movie, which is yet another parody of a parody. This time it seems to be a parody of Basic Instinct and Fatal Attraction, but does not look funny whatsoever. It's a movie called Hexed. So yeah, this is another one of those movies it feels like it's supposed to be something else, but I guess this is supposed to be a spoof on like Basic Instinct and Fatal Attraction, but I don't get the idea. I don't get the title of Hexed. I mean, I don't get why it has that title. I mean, this movie looks really all over the place, and apparently this was something that was originally intended to be something else. The guy who directed this, Alan Spencer, made the very underrated TV series from the 80s, Sledgehammer, which is a hilarious police parody series. If you haven't seen Sledgehammer, do yourself a favor and check that out. But when he made this movie, he was not given the full creative control, was forced to film the movie on a really tight schedule. The studio cut the budget. They cut the budget weeks before the film was set to begin, and actually removed almost 3 weeks from the shooting schedule. And the studio also made major edits, music changes, and it changed the entire tone of the movie that he was intended to make from this. And still made a profit, honestly. It still made it made $2 million off of a $700,000 budget, which I guess that's considered somewhat of a success because the studio made its money back. But in the end, what did you really get out of it? Because this movie does not look any interesting whatsoever. It looks like a movie that's trying to be like a parody of Basic Instinct, but at the same time, it felt like this movie was done a lot better by another movie that came out by the same studio, Columbia Pictures, which was So I Married an Axe Murderer, which was pretty much the same premise as this, except except that movie was a little bit more funnier than this movie is. Nothing about this trailer made me looked funny whatsoever. I mean, it looked like a bunch of actors who I guess they were trying to set up as the next big thing, like Ari Gross. This was one of the many movies that he was in when they were trying to make him the next big star. Then you have Claudia Christian, who became better known for her work on such shows as Babylon 5, and recently she's been on 911. She was also in Atlantis: The Lost Empire. And then you got Arlie Ermy, and Arlie Ermy is a great character actor, and there's nothing more you can say about him, but you throw him into the mix, and it's just like, you should have something here. A good script could really help this. A good editing and good pacing could actually help this, but studio interference, man. This movie could have been I feel like this movie could have been something much more interesting, but hearing the story about how the studio just completely butchered it, chances are this movie probably came out pretty badly, and I guess it has a cult following to it, so maybe I'm just not seeing it. Maybe I'm seeing something that this trailer is not showing. Maybe they sold this movie the wrong way, but nothing about this movie looks interesting or funny at all. I mean, this movie looks like a movie that could have been something special, but the studio interfered, and the end result was a really bad-looking film. But, haven't seen it, so I can't really comment more on it, but, that's just my thinking on it. So, that's Hexed. Now, with that said, let's go ahead and move on to the next movie, and that is Night Moves. Hard to believe this was directed by the same man that did The Mighty Quinn, which is a great, underrated Denzel Washington movie. But this movie, I don't really know what the heck was that. I mean, it felt like this was kind of an inspiration for Saw, kind of, but at the same time, just by the way everything was setting itself up. Or you know what? I take that back, because I feel like this movie was kind of an inspiration for something like David Fincher's The Game, because there's definitely a lot of elements from this trailer you can tell came from The Game. If you haven't seen The Game, it's a David Fincher movie that he directed and stars Michael Douglas. A very underrated movie from Fincher, and this was just after he did Seven. Great film overall. I feel like this movie was trying to be something like that, but just wasn't all that interesting. Just wasn't all that engaging. Plus, it was cursed from the beginning, because you had Christopher Lambert and Diane Lane, who were dating each other, were married at the time of this, and you know the old saying in Hollywood, never work with your spouse, because 9 times out of 10, the thing you're working on doesn't work out well. And this movie definitely looks like it didn't do so well. It didn't get any good reviews, but I guess it did make back its money back, so at least that's something. But yeah, nothing about this looked interesting whatsoever, and it's a shame, because this guy did The Mighty Quinn, which is a great movie, and this movie just feels like a movie that was just... the intent was not really there to make a really good movie. It felt like this movie was there to just be something to throw out there just by looking at that trailer alone. But that's got all I got to say about that one. So that's Night Moves. Let's go ahead and move on to the last movie that we have here, and that is Gun Crazy. So out of all the new movies that came out this week, this is probably the one that looks the most interesting, just from the fact that you've got Drew Barrymore here playing this teenager who murders her stepfather, who's a sexually abusive man, after he teaches her how to use a gun, and she meets this prisoner who seduces her back into the world of guns, and then she marries this person and decides to show her the remains of her stepfather. He helps her dispose of the body, dispose of the corpse. Howard commits several homicides, although he was provoked in every instance. And this is basically an inspiration for a 1950s movie called Gun Crazy, which was, I'm looking right here, it was kind of the same thing, a crime noir film, right at the time when that was the thing. But some notable things about this movie is that this is Tamara Davis who directed this movie. If you don't know that name, you definitely probably have seen her work before, because she's done other movies after this, such as CB4 with Chris Rock, which actually comes out a couple months after this. And then, most notably, Adam Sandler's first leading role in Billy Madison, Best Men, Half Baked, Skip Parts, Crossroads. She's made some decent films, and we'll get to those ones as we go along. But this was the first movie that she directed. This was a script that she had written back in 1985, and it didn't go anywhere until 6 years later, and then was finally shown to the Cannes Film Festival in '92, and then was shown at Showtime the following year, before eventually getting the limited theatrical release that we have here. Also interesting enough that Drew Barrymore was actually in one of the three Amy Fisher movies that came out at the time. There was that time in January where they had all three networks doing different Amy Fisher movies. Like, I guess that was the thing at the time where everybody had to do the same, one for one movie of the week, and then you have this movie coming out at the same time. I don't know if that was just a coincidence that they were all coming out at the same time or what, but of all the movies that we looked at, like I said, this is the one that looks probably the most interesting, and I think this is the one that I think gives Drew Barrymore her first real adult performance that shows how eventually she would become the actress that we know her as today, as she's made a lot of really good movies since then. I think this was the first one that really made her kind of pushed her into these more adult roles. Like, we had Poison Ivy the year before, and then this movie comes around. At least to me, I think this was one of the ones that really showed that, okay, this girl's got some acting chops, and it kind of turned her career. This and Poison Ivy kind of turned her career around, because she was making not the best movies after, in between E.T. and then Poison Ivy in that 10-year span. So, but I mean, this looks like a pretty decent movie. It looks like a movie that could be very interesting, if not a little chaotic, but I'd be interested to see it at some point. So this is one I might definitely check out at some point. But for right now, I could just say it has a lot of promise to it. So there you go, Gun Crazy. And so on that note, we wrap up another issue of Time About the Movies. And next time around, we'll wrap up another month. We'll look at the last month of January 29th, with 4 movies, including Sniper, Joe Dante's Matinee starring John Goodman, the sequel Children of the Corn 2, The Final Sacrifice, and also Nemesis. So 4 movies to look at next time around, and we'll cover those on the next episode. But until then, thank you very much for watching. If you want to see more videos like this, please hit the playlist on the next page, check out the previous episode, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for another episode. So thank you for watching, I'll see you next time, and until then, as always, take care.